You know, I never thought I'd see a funeral treated like a bargain sale. It's shocking. Heartbreaking even. How some folks count pennies while their own kin lie cold. But that's exactly what happened. And it's a story that still burns inside me. It was a chilly afternoon, the kind where the wind sneaks through the cracks and makes you pull your coat tighter. I sat in that cramped living room, the clock ticking louder than the whispered voices around me. Everyone seemed rushed, their eyes darting between the worn calendar and their watches, like there was some invisible deadline pressing down. My hands trembled just holding the old photo album, memories fading faster than respect, it seemed. What would I lose if I stayed quiet? What could I possibly gain by speaking up now? Why stretch it out? Someone said, voice cold and quick. It's just money after all. But isn't dignity worth more than dollars? We can't afford to drag this out. Another insisted. People don't want to wait around. Those words echoed, but inside me a storm was brewing. How did we come to this? How did grief become a ledger? I'm sitting here sharing this with you, because this story isn't just mine. It's about all of us, about the choices we make when it matters most. Stick around and I promise you'll see why this rushed farewell left scars deeper than any goodbye. Maybe by the end you'll understand why some things are priceless, even when the world tries to put a price tag on them. My grandfather, everyone called him Vieux Joal, was the kind of man whose presence filled a room without him having to say a word. At 78, with silver hair that caught the sunlight like threads of spun glass, he carried the gentle weight of years lived fully. He had this slow, deliberate way of speaking, as if choosing each word was a gift he was handing you. Life, he'd say, is less about the years you count and more about the moments that count. This story unfolded in our small hometown nestled between rolling hills and dusty roads, a place where everyone knew your business and your birthday, and sometimes both before you did. It was late autumn, the sky overcast and heavy, the kind of gray that seeps into your bones and makes you crave warmth. Vieux Joal's modest house, once a lively haven filled with laughter and the rich aroma of his famous coffee, now felt eerily quiet, shadowed by the weight of what was to come. I remember sitting beside him in that dimly lit kitchen, the wooden tables scarred from decades of family dinners and late-night talks. He looked at me, eyes clouded but steady, and said softly, "You know, sometimes the hardest goodbyes aren't the ones we say, they're the ones we don't get to say properly." There was a fragile intimacy in that moment, like he was confiding a secret meant only for my ears. "Promise me," he whispered, "that when the time comes you'll fight to keep the memories alive, no matter what the cost." I nodded, though inside, a knot of unease tightened. I didn't yet understand how those words would haunt me in the days ahead. And then came the day the house filled with hurried footsteps and hushed arguments, the day I realized that love and money were about to collide in ways I hadn't imagined. Something shifted that afternoon, something I wasn't prepared for. But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to feel what I felt, the cold, the weight, the silence that screamed louder than any voice. Because that's when I saw how quickly respect can be lost, and how painfully fragile our last moments together really are. The first conflict erupted just hours after Vieux Joal's breathing grew shallow, his frail body nestled in the old armchair by the window. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. My Aunt Maria arrived with her husband, her eyes sharp and voice clipped, as if carrying the weight of unspoken grievances. "Is this really how we're going to do this?" she snapped, her gaze darting around the room as if accusing the very walls of betrayal. "We should be honoring him, not fighting over scraps." Her words hung in the air, but my Uncle Louis wasn't ready to back down. "These scraps are his legacy, Maria. We have to make sure it's preserved properly. You think I want to argue? I just want what's fair." I watched Vieux Joal's chest rise and fall, his eyelids fluttering faintly. He seemed caught between worlds, his mind perhaps aware of the storm brewing but unable to intervene. I reached out, gently taking his hand, feeling the thin skin and the pulse that was growing weaker by the minute. "Please," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "not now." The air grew thick with tension. Maria's fingers unconsciously clenched into fists, her jaw tightening as she glanced toward the cracked wooden table where the family papers lay scattered, wills, receipts, and faded photographs, relics of a lifetime. Vaujoal's frail voice finally broke the silence, barely audible but resolute. "Money. It's not what I wanted to define us." We all turned to him. His eyes, still gleaming with a hint of that old spark, sought mine. "Remember what I told you, moments that count. Don't lose those in the fight." But the moment shattered as Louise stepped forward, voice rising. "With all due respect, memories don't pay the bills." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The room seemed to close in, the shadows lengthening, as if the house itself mourned the unraveling of our family. Maria's voice cracked, a mixture of anger and sorrow. "He's right. This isn't just about money, it's about respect. Something that's slipping away while we stand here shouting." Vaujoal's hand twitched in mine, a faint squeeze that spoke volumes. His eyes closed slowly, as if retreating from the chaos that threatened to drown him. I swallowed hard, the knot in my throat tightening. "We have to stop this," I said, voice trembling, "before it's too late." But deep down, I knew the fight had already begun, and with it, the fragile threads holding our family together were fraying fast. As the afternoon light dimmed, the first cracks in our last moments with Vaujoal fractured into a storm that none of us could escape. The hours that followed felt like a relentless tide, each wave crashing harder than the last. Maria's bitterness seemed to grow, her eyes flashing with accusations that cut sharper than any blade. "You always think you know best, Louise," she spat, voice trembling with a mix of frustration and hurt. "But you never cared to listen before. Why now?" Louis' face reddened, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the arm of a nearby chair. "Don't twist this, Maria. I'm just trying to protect what's left of him. The truth, the family name." I stood by Vaujoal, watching his pale chest rise and fall, his breath shallow but steady, as if he was holding on for something beyond our squabbles. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me, the room thick with unspoken regrets. "Maybe," I dared to speak softly, "maybe we're all just scared, scared of losing him, and scared of what comes after." Maria's eyes flickered with something softer, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the armor of anger. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I don't want to lose him, but I'm tired of feeling like an outsider in my own family." A brief silence fell. Even Louis seemed to falter, the fight draining from his posture. "We're all lost without him," he admitted, voice low. Then suddenly, Vaujoal's eyes fluttered open. They gleamed with a quiet strength as he whispered, "Family is more than possessions. It's the love you hold in your hearts." His hand squeezed mine once more, faint but firm. The room seemed to exhale, the tension momentarily lifting as if his words had woven a fragile thread of hope. But that fragile peace shattered when a sharp knock echoed from the front door. A stranger's voice called from outside. "I need to speak with the family about the will." We all froze, the fragile unity slipping away as suspicion and fear crept back into our eyes. I swallowed hard, but I didn't know that was coming. I murmured, a cold dread settling in my chest, and I didn't know that this was only the beginning of a deeper storm that would test us all. The door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room with a calculating coldness. He wore a crisp suit that didn't belong in this humble house, and in his hand he held a worn leather briefcase. "My name is Mr. Carvalho," he announced, voice smooth but edged with something unsettling. "I'm here to deliver Vaujoal's final testament." A heavy silence fell. Louis' fists clenched at his sides. Maria's breath hitched, and my heart hammered so loudly, I feared it might burst from my chest. Mr. Carvalho opened the briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, the wax stamp breaking with a crisp snap that echoed like a gunshot in the tense room. He handed it to me, and my hands trembled as I broke the seal. Unfolding the letter, my eyes darted across the page, each word sinking like a stone in my stomach. "I don't understand," I stammered. "This says Vaugeois left everything not to any of us, but to a charity for orphans, and that Louis is explicitly excluded." Louis's face drained of color, his body stiffened, and he took a staggering step back, knocking over a chair. "That's a lie," he hissed, voice cracking. "He loved me. He couldn't have done this." Maria's eyes burned with a mixture of shock and vindication. "All this time, you were hiding something from us." I looked back at Vaugeois, whose frail hand twitched weakly, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "I wanted to see if you'd choose family over greed," he whispered, barely audible. The room spun. The man who'd seemed the most certain, Louis, was unraveling. The bitter accusations, the hidden resentments, the fragile bonds, all exposed in an instant. My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Maybe the real legacy isn't what he left us, but what we do with the truth now." The clock ticked loudly, each second stretching unbearably as we faced the unknown chasm between us. And in that moment, everything we thought we knew about family, loyalty, and love shattered like glass at our feet. The tension lingered in the air long after Mr. Carvalho left, the echo of his footsteps fading into the quiet of our broken home. Louis sat slumped against the wall, the weight of rejection pressing down on him heavier than any inheritance ever could. Maria, usually so composed, wiped away a tear, her eyes distant yet clearer than before. I knelt beside Vaugeois, his fragile frame trembling slightly. "Sabi, Ms. Neko," he murmured, his voice barely more than a breath. "Inheritance isn't about riches, it's about what remains when everything else is gone. I needed to know if you'd stand together, or let greed tear you apart." His words settled over us like a soft rain, washing away some of the bitterness. Louis looked up, eyes glistening with regret, and for the first time, I saw not anger but pain, a plea for forgiveness, not from Vaugeois, but from us, his family. In the days that followed, something shifted. We began to talk, really talk, about old wounds and hidden fears. The legacy Vaugeois left was not in gold or land, but in the chance to rebuild what we'd almost destroyed, trust and love. I realized then that his final testament was never about the will. It was a lesson carved into our hearts, that true wealth lies in unity, in choosing each other over division. So if you ever find yourself clutching at what you think is your due, remember this: sometimes, the greatest inheritance is the grace to forgive, the courage to heal, and the wisdom to hold family above all else. And in that truth, Vaugeois' spirit lives on, richer than any fortune could make us. As Vaugeois' gentle wisdom echoes through our hearts, let us carry forward his legacy, not in gold or land, but in the unbreakable bonds of family and forgiveness. Remember, true wealth is not measured by what we possess, but by the love we choose to nurture. If this story touched you, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation alive, honoring the lessons that remind us all: family is the greatest inheritance we will ever receive.